pleased to introduce an epic coach and who is known for stellar curriculum development. She's the owner and founder of Charlie Box Leadership, Dawn Shaw. Hey, Dawn.
Hello, hello. Thank you so much for having me.
It is our pleasure. I know that the team is really excited to learn about all of the amazing tools and tips you have for us on resiliency in the job search. So let's get to it.
Yes, let's get to it. Awesome. Thank you so much. Hello, hello, everyone. I am absolutely over the moon excited to be here with you today. Thank you so much for spending the lunch hour with me. And sit back, relax, and I hope you find a lot of value in this. I'm so excited to talk about two of my favorite topics. One is resiliency. Yes, we're going to dive in. What is it? How do we use it? And how does it apply to the job search? To get started, I'd like to give a little bit of background about who I am. And my career background. So I started my undergraduate at Metro State College of Denver, which is where I grew up. I grew up in Colorado. And I was really particularly interested in what makes people tick. You know, I majored in psychology, and really it was all about what's up with what we do. That quickly translated into what we do at work. Why do we do things that we do at work? And so I got my master's in human resource development, and I focused in on instructional design in that learning category, organizational design, what's the behaviors at work, and career coaching. So how do we get there? Individual capabilities that align with what our passions are. So I started my career in the coaching side, and I coached students at 3 major universities. One was Bauer College of Business at UH. The other was at UT Austin. In Austin, I'm based here now, so this is home. And then I had the wonderful opportunity to join the Fuqua School of Business, and I coached MBA students there in finance. After that, I had an opportunity to go into organizations and learn a little bit about how what we were teaching at the educational level really translated into organizational development. So through all of this, I did raise 3 children at the same time. So those are the sweet little girls in the middle of the screen there. So my young women leaders, as I like to call them. And the whole time I've been coaching with students is really to figure out what, the job search, basically. That's the majority of where I've spent my time. So I'm super excited to share all of my tips and tricks and everything that I've learned with you today. So that's my pitch. And I wanted to give that to you because here's another perspective that a lot of times people don't say, is that what I just displayed there were everybody who said yes to me, okay? What it doesn't say is how many job interviews I've been on and didn't make it. What it doesn't say is how many job applications I have filled out in my 15 years plus, and I got rejected, or worse yet, I didn't even get, a notification that it had been received. And so I just give you that because I think so many times people in the job search, we see we're going through it, right? The job search is a hard process to go through. And, we see things on LinkedIn and people, yay, celebrating, which I absolutely love the celebration of it. And I just want to give the backstory of how many hurdles and how many things that you really have to go through to get to where you get the yeses. So the stream I just told you were all the yeses for me, and I'm absolutely grateful. If any of the people that had rejected me at the beginning, my career would have sounded a lot different. And so it's just to say that there's a lot of background that we often don't talk about, and that's really where resilience comes in. So where we're going to start is we're going to talk a little bit about what resilience is and look at the research of where it started, and then we're going to go towards how that application is in the job search itself. And so where resilience studies started was with a researcher named Emmy Werner. She was a developmental psychologist who studied young children. It was a 40-year study, and these children were they were exposed to environmental risk factors, which means that one of their parents were either mentally ill or struggled in some other way. And what she found over over the 40 years is that 2/3 of those children ended up, unfortunately, part of a statistic in terms of not being able to really function in society. And 1/3 of those kids who had been exposed to really dire circumstances did end up making, a series of good choices, and they were able to give back to their communities in productive ways. And what they labeled those 1/3 children is resilient. That's the word that they used to identify what they were seeing throughout this study. And so what the early years looked like was that they thought, this is genetic, like people either have it or they don't. And it's a brain chemical in your mind. What they later found out as the study progressed was that, hey, environment has a big impact on how people can stay resilient and what choices they get to make, what choices are available. So, hey, maybe it's not just that people are born with it or not. Hey, maybe it's really about their environment. And so even a step further, what they learned at the very end was, what? Actually, everybody has the capacity to learn from difficulty. Okay, so we have this study of research that, of course, started, but as it developed, the good news is that everyone can embrace the strategies. Everyone has the opportunity through challenge to develop a different way to look at things, and everyone can get more resilient through time. So that's a little bit of history about it. So what is resilience? I'll go through a couple of different quotes that I'd like to outline of trying to define it. The first one, the ability to adapt to change, even when the circumstances are discouraging. Okay, so the ability to adapt to change, even when the circumstances are discouraging. And what better opportunity do we have than the world that we're living in right now? I would say that we're experiencing rapid adapting to change and in very discouraging times in terms of COVID, and the amount of people who lost their jobs, unfortunately, are on the job search. Predominantly a lot of women have left the workforce. So that's very discouraging. So what's our ability to adapt to that change? Here's another one by Connor. Resilience is the ability to absorb the high level of disruptive change. I love this part, while displaying minimal dysfunctional behavior. I like this one because it reminds us that we all have dysfunctional behavior. And the idea here isn't to be perfect and to say, oh, I have resilience and that looks a certain way. It's to identify and recognize the areas that we bring dysfunction and minimize that as we're experiencing disruptive change. And so I like the shine on displaying minimal dysfunctional behavior. So in the study of the children, for example, of course, everyone had some level of dysfunction, but their ability to minimize that as they got older and as they got more opportunity was really the differentiator between those that were labeled resilient and those who weren't. Resilience is the capacity to bounce back from disruptions. In terms of careers, resilience is the capacity to continue making progress toward your current career goals with the resources and strategies you have already developed. It's a mouthful, this one's pretty long, but what I really like about this is that the capacity to continue to make progress. So this is going to be vital as we look at the job search, because you might face a lot of setbacks. You might not get the email. You might get to final rounds and not be selected. And so your ability the next day, or give yourself whatever grace you need to get through that, but your ability to continue to make progress in the face of disappointment is going to be a real key to building resilience. The only thing that I would say about this quote, resilience is the capacity to bounce back, that's quite common when people think about resilience. The only thing I would say to that is resilience is so much more than just bouncing back to where you were before. Resilience, really taking the definition in, suggests that we're actually better off as a result of our challenge. So in my definition of what I like to call resilience is not only that we bounce back, but that we bounce back better, that we really take in the challenge, we internalize it, we understand what it is, and that actually produces greater outcomes than if we didn't have the challenge at all. Last one here, the ability to adapt to career change as it happens, and by extension, adapt to what the market demands. So this is taking a very specific lens of the career search as well. And the reason that I like this is because, business is personal. It's very personal, and some say business isn't personal. And what I mean by that is I do believe it's personal because, of course, you're experiencing that disappointment. But the good news is that what we're trying to adapt to is market demands. That is what's causing the disruption, right? Things that are outside of our control. So even though it might feel like it's you, right? And I completely empathize with that sentiment. The reality is that the external environment is changing in ways that we don't have control. And where's the bridge between what we have to offer, all the great things, and what the market is really demanding of us today? And that'll continue to change into the future in ways that we're predicting right now, but we really don't know. So here's a figure that I'd like to show you in terms of what the research is saying, at least at the time, of what skills are going to be in demand for the 21st century leader. And this was actually taken in 2019, which I find fascinating because I think so much of it can be applied to today in terms of what we're experiencing with COVID. I think COVID really sped up what was already going to be happening in terms of what the skill sets that are needed. So the first one you see, ability to lead through more complexity and ambiguity. So here's the best news, is your career search right now is actually developing this skill. It's going to be essential even when you're on the job, is the ability to handle that complexity. It's actually resilience. The ability to lead through influence, being able to communicate effectively and get work done even when things are tough, right? Again, resilience. The ability to manage on a remote basis. So we're seeing that in spades right now. I would love to be with you in person, for example, and right now we're doing it remotely because that's the world that we live in. So our ability to manage through these times, again, is skill sets that are actually needed for the workforce of the future. The ability to manage combinations of humans and machines. Yeah, this one's big. I mean, my kids are native. I'm still learning. So our ability to really connect with all the tools and capabilities that we have, again, another skill, and to lead more quickly. So things are going to speed up. You can find a copy of this online at Deloitte, the Human Capital Trends of 2019, if you're curious to learn a little bit more about the research behind this. So why is this all important? Why is it important? And I guess I would urge you to consider that the way we tell a story actually really matters. When we look at our search, when we look at our life, we tell ourselves and each other stories, and essentially that is what the career search is. That's what our career path is. When I started the top of the webinar and I told you my story of my career, that is a story. Right? That is what I tell people who are curious about what my background is. I told you the inside scoop as well in terms of another perspective, but how we process our careers, how we process our experiences, it comes out in ways that we might not really be conscious of. So I think it's just important to remember that the stories that we tell ourselves are really important because that is what we communicate to our external environment. And the good news is like I just mentioned, this is going to be good for the skill set of the future. So everything that you're learning here in terms of your job search can be translated into the work that you will be eventually doing. And the other reason why it's important, why talk about resilience at all, is that, so many times we're trying to control outcomes when it comes to the job search. Hire me, pick me, choose me, here's my credentials, here's what I can offer. But unfortunately, we don't always have control over those outcomes. But what we do have control over is how we interpret it and what story we tell. So this is a graphic that I like to highlight. Everybody goes through it, so it's totally normal to start with a ton of hope, right? like, oh my gosh, there's so much opportunity. Let's say you get that email back and it says you have been selected to move to the next round, and you're just filled with hope and you're like, oh, I'm going to crush it. This is great. It's all going, swimmingly. It's all going up and to the right, as I like to say. And then the next day you get the call and you're like, yeah, I'm so sorry. Unfortunately, we're going to go with a different candidate. And so we go into this curve, and it's a downward slope. But what typically happens, and this is repetitive over a lot of students that I've coached through the job search, is that at the bottom of that curve is where we learn, is where we have insight, is where maybe we could highlight our story in a different way. Maybe we didn't, maybe we didn't really want that job, and we forced ourselves into it. I'm just playing different scenarios out, but the point is that some, at that bottom level, you get some insight, you can gain some clarity in terms of what the job search is. And then at the end of the day, our confidence grows when we see what we've done work well. This particular graphic is taken from IDOU. It's out of the design thinking school at Stanford University, and it's basically taking a human-centered design and applying it to the job search. And so human-centered design, if you're not familiar, is it's an iterative process. And so it means that you try something and then you learn and you iterate. Then you try something else, then you learn, then you iterate. And so when you're looking at product design or any kind of, creative processes at work, a design thinking process can open up a lot more ideas and a lot more learning if you take it in terms of expectation that you're going to go from hope to insight to confidence each time. This is definitely normalizes the process as well. And so if we take that approach to the job search, then we're going to test it. We're going to get a career coach, maybe we're going to try our pitch, and then we're going to learn something that either worked or we did it or it didn't work. And then we're going to try again. And then we're going to rinse and repeat instead of all or nothing. So I really like this approach for applying to the job search. Okay, so I'd love for you to take out a piece of paper, pencil, anything you have around your desk, and I'd like you to reflect and think about the last major setback you encountered. I'll give you a minute to think about that. Just jot it down. I want you to think about what it was. What were the circumstances? This could be something recent. This could be something big. Just whatever comes to your mind first. What is a major setback that you've experienced? All right. So I want you to use that as fodder for the curve, right? So we're going to try to go from what that setback was to what you learned from it, what you can glean from it, and what story you're going to eventually tell as a result of that setback. All right. So I hope you have it all jotted down. Okay, so now we're going to go through the strategy. So I talked a little bit about, we don't have control over the ultimate outcome, but we do have control over what we do with it, what our journey looks like, and how we process it. So the next three components here are strategies. Now, there's a ton of research out there, so I pulled out 3 that I think really work well when it comes to application of the job search, but there are a lot of things out there that you can find that are very good as well. We're going to focus today on protection, capacity, and renewal. So building protection. So what this really means is that protection is defined as the community and the people that surround you. So this is kind of the environmental argument on the structure, is that your community is so important when it comes to building in resilience, because let's face it, sometimes we just need help. We all need help. We all come into places in our lives that are just bigger than what we can handle all on our own. And it's so important, it's so vital and critical for us to have the people and support that we need to get us through the tough times. So, sometimes what people do, think about dysfunctional behavior for just a second. Sometimes dysfunctional behavior could be to withdraw, which is a very natural response to stress for some of us more than others. But to minimize that dysfunctional behavior, in those moments, we need to come to our community and say, man, I'm really struggling. I need a pep talk. I just got rejected for the nth time, and I really need I really need that person to come in and say, you know what, you got this. We all need that. And so that's one thing that you can do. If you know that that's your withdrawal, just put it in the calendar and keep going. So here's a couple of things, the action items that you can do to build the protection that you need for your resilience on the job search. And that's schedule calls with mentors, just put it on the calendar. Hey, can we connect 30 minutes? Update your LinkedIn profile. This is more around connecting with the people that are on LinkedIn. Of course, it's the major work social media platform. And so this can definitely help you with the community build. So making sure that you're, plugged in and looking for people to connect with can be a really great way to build up that community, to build up the network and the opportunities that might be there. Create a board of directors. This is to mean, who are those people that have always had your back, that know your work product pretty well and that can vouch for you and remind you of how awesome you are. I am so thankful for all of the people that have been with me in times where I've needed it the most. And they've been able to say, Dawn, I know you're feeling it, but let me remind you of why you're great, of the people that you've helped. And that can definitely help you get through those tough moments. So create a board of directors. It could be 2, 3 people, but these are the kind of people that have your back and they're going to tell you to keep at it. Ask for help. Yeah, this one's tough for me. Asking for help isn't necessarily comfortable, but again, when we think about that dysfunctional behavior, withdrawal and isolation can be a big deterrent from your resilience muscle. Volunteer is a great way to get out there, right? So if you're not going to go out, if you just even need a break, this is a big community builder, and it can get you out and it can build that protection of positivity. Give back, conduct informational interviews. Informational interviews are interviews that you're not necessarily asking for the job. It's not a traditional interview, but they're just about information around the company. This can be a really great use of your time in between waiting for the callbacks, so sometimes the search stalls a bit, you're waiting to hear back. Informational interviews can be a really good use of your time. You're building the network and you're just really being curious, so it's less about being all polished and ready for the interview, and it's kind of just a deep exhale and say, hey, what do you like about your work? Why do you like it? Tell me a little bit more. This can definitely build the network and build that capacity for community. All right, so building capacity is another strategy that you can develop, and this is what I call opportunity. So be ready for the opportunity. Putting energy into activities that you can control, right, instead of all those things that you can't. So what that looks like is, updating your resume. Preparing for opportunity just means that you're ready for the call, okay? So it just means that, if you're at Starbucks, right, and somebody is behind you and you're ready for your pitch, you're ready, you're ready for the opportunity. And these things you can do, again, in between the times where you're not sure what's going to happen next. Update your LinkedIn profile. Here is what I mean by this versus the last slide, is that this is really about making sure all of your words and all of your content and all of your pictures and things like that on LinkedIn are the best that you can make it, is setting it up for opportunity, whereas the one before is about building the community. It's about connecting with people. And so in opportunity, in this capacity muscle, it's really about doing your best to have your best resources available. Again, that looks like a resume review, making sure, I know you all know this, like making sure there's no typos, etc. Having a second, third, fourth pair of eyes on it is a great way to build that capacity. The 2-hour job search and Odyssey planning are 2 of my absolute favorite job search engines, if you will, that I believe really prepare people for important conversations and to structure your job search. So the 2-hour job search, you can go look it up. It's a book, author Steve Dalton. He created a system, and basically he's saying that he's trying to debunk the myth that it's a 40-hour-a-week job. You've heard that in the past, I'm sure, that says, hey, you have to search for a job like it is your job. And he's saying, put 2 hours in so that you can live the rest of your life. And so he's designed a step-by-step process of things that you can do. And this, again, is creating the opportunity. Odyssey planning is design thinking. It's in that same frame with the Stanford School. And it's really about thinking up multiple opportunities. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that later. But it's about thinking about plans B, C, D, E, and having that ready. Update your cover letter, sign up for career coaching, attend virtual events. These are all ways that you can build the capacity. Building renewal, this one's so important. This is where that endurance comes, the perseverance is maintaining the positive attitude. This is a lot of the reflective internal work that resiliency is. And that is practicing your story. Write down what you think that's happening. Check it with someone else. Is it really happening? Practice the interview. Get feedback. Journal your experience. Sometimes what I've seen so many people do is that they've had a horrible experience with their last employer, let's say. They're just so bitter and angry about certain things. And then when they're in the interview, that's the first thing that pops in their head. And then they're in this situation where it's like, oh man, of course, I'm not going to tell all of the things that are actually, very upsetting, but that's what's on the top of their mind. And so journaling your experience can get it out, right? Like, really hit refresh. What did you learn from your last position that you didn't like, right? You can even use some resilience there. What's that major setback and what did you learn from it? And asking yourself questions, again, this is the self-reflection. Visual many possible futures, positive futures is an essential skill for resilience. I love this one too, because it's really about painting what could be again. It's getting that dreamer out of you. This can be a lifesaver when you're going through discouraging events. What do you want your future to look like? Okay, you're getting a bunch of no's. Okay, things aren't working out. Well, what would work? Dream a bit, and I know it sounds awful, but it's putting that hope back in the curve, right? So that iterative process. Oh, let's hope again. Let's dream again. Let's go back and let's do multiple futures so that there's multiple things that could go well. That can be a major thing that can help. Wonderful. Okay. So let's go back to the question, what major setback? So I'd like you to take a minute. What did you learn from that major setback? If you think about it just for a minute, I know it might be hard and it might not be super intuitive, but what is it that you think you really learned about yourself and about what you want? When I get to this part of the session, it's usually that we realize that pain is our greatest teacher, right? So those moments of setback, we actually realize what we're made of. And that's what resilience gives you. You can't be resilient unless you have a challenge. It sort of necessitates it. And so a lot of times, you can get tons of great feedback. People are telling you you're great, but until you actually internalize that, and it's usually through some kind of setback that you face, you don't really know it. And so think about that. See if it resonates with what you wrote down. Pain is our greatest teacher. I love this quote. Resilience is accepting your new reality, even if it's less good than the one you had before. You can fight it. You can do nothing but scream about what you've lost, or you can accept that and try to put together something that is good. That is resilience. It's not getting exactly what you want, but it's learning from what you've been given and then doing something positive with it. That is the story of the children, right? That I started this with. Their ability to reframe, to tell the story, to understand what they learned, and maybe not, of course, wish it on anyone else, but appreciate that that's the gift that they were given through it. And so I encourage you, we're coming up on my hard stop, but I want to say to all the people that are job searching and all the people that are going through it, I get you, I hear you. I know it's a hard process, and it can absolutely be the material that's made for the biggest lessons in our lives. And I know that doesn't necessarily feel great in the moment, but I promise you on the other side, it always makes sense. My career example is that when you look back, you can see how the dots lined up. In the moment, I had no idea. But looking back, man, I'm so grateful some people said no, because if they hadn't, I wouldn't have been able to say yes to the wonderful things that did show up. And I know that they're going to show up again for you too. So with that, I will take questions. I hope that if anything resonates, or if you have any questions about anything that I'd said earlier, I would love to hear what they are. And I'm so excited to, to hear them. Hello, Lorelai.
Thank you, Dawn. That was incredible. Now we're going to take a moment to engage with Dawn with your questions and her answers. So at the bottom of your screen, you will see a chat feature or the Q&A feature. I highly recommend you grab one of those, open it up, and throw your questions in the chat or the Q&A so that Dawn can engage with us. And yes, I wanted to reaffirm with you that this webinar is being recorded, and it will be available on both the HERdacity website and the HERdacity YouTube channel. So feel free to check back with us to see when that webinar is available for you to use this resource again. Now, Dawn, do you have resume review resources that you would recommend to our audience?
Yeah, resume review resources. I really think that, there's a lot of things on LinkedIn that you can go and hire someone to actually look at it. I'd say that having a second pair of eyes is definitely worth it. So I would start there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
What do you feel is the best way to search for jobs? Now, I know you mentioned the 2-hour job search by Steve Dalton. Do you have any other options for us?
Yeah. Let's see. What I really tell people is to actually start with a values assessment. So a lot of times our values change throughout our lives. So what we valued, when we did that exercise, let's say the last time, if things have changed and that you're aligning in a different way, or something's changed significantly in your life, like, kids and all that kind of fun stuff, sometimes your values change. And so I say, the first thing to do is, what are your values? The second one is, what companies out there align to those values? So this gets this kind of angles your job search in a little bit of a different way. It's not just about the scraping by, like, oh God, what's out there? It's more like, what do I hope for? What do I value? And what companies are honestly out there that I'm going to get excited about authentically? That kind of energy, even at the beginning, is absolutely essential to show up even in your interview. And so I guess I'd say values, I'd say, where's your energy? Write down a list, 40 companies, just write them down, go search them up, get excited about it. I know that's sometimes hard when people are like, but I'm so discouraged, hope is dangerous. And I get it. But I think that the energy that comes and the possible futures that could be really gives you the energy to go through the process again. And hey, guess what? If you get the interview and you're working for an amazing company, like, that's how I would approach the job search. So I'd say values, 40 lists, network, try to get those informational interviews before the real one. Again, you're still building up that energy, right? Because when you're talking to someone and they're like, oh, my job's amazing, you're like, oh, cool, that's awesome. It's just a lot more positive interactions versus sort of this view of, please see me, oh gosh, so anyway, I think I've answered the question.
Well, speaking of, trying to go back to the job search again and hitting that interview, let's say we have a difficult interview and you come out of it feeling a little, worse for the wear. What are some strategies for us to deal with possible sense of failure and maybe even a little bit of imposter syndrome along the way?
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's so, yeah. I'd say that give yourself some time to grieve. The arch that I showed, that could be to some a grieving process. And so sometimes it's really important to think about, like, man, that sucked, and be okay with sitting in the that sucked part. Because again, if you don't process it, it kind of leaks out in dysfunctional ways. And so I would say, first, let yourself feel the emotion of the sting. Whatever your process is, if you'd like to journal, if you need time, take a walk, give yourself, a nap, like just a little bit of self-care there. And then I would say, through the process that we just did a bit, was write down what the setback was and what you learned from it. What did it teach you? after the sting, after like, was there something in there that it taught you? Like, were you really aligned? Did you, did you like the person? Because a lot of times people say this, but we forget it in the interview, but you're
Mhm.
interviewing them as much as they're interviewing you. Like, hey, maybe they were kind of jerks and that's why you felt crappy. You know what I mean? So
Good
we
point.
tend to internalize it like we're terrible, we're never gonna get a job. And in reality, people are people and they might have had a bad day and their company culture might really stink. And so I would say journal about it and then ask yourself, what did I learn?
Mhm.
I have worksheets actually that I'll send out afterwards that helps you with that process, because basically what we're doing is reframing there. We're coming at it like, I suck, I hate this, and then we learn from it, and all of a sudden that story changes, and that's the story we want to bring forward.
Excellent. Well, to dovetail off of that question, what about entrepreneurs who might be getting rejected in their search for, starting their business?
Oh my gosh, I love this question because I'm a startup and I totally get it. Startups are hard. Like, I want to say they're harder than the job search, but that's I need a reframe, right? I need to journal about that. But one great piece of advice that I just received, because I'm at the Capital Factory actually trying to launch my business, and I had a really hard day because people were just saying no all the time. Like, and I really started to question, is my idea not good? I went through the spin, right? And I fortunately have access to these mentors, and I said, you know what, I don't even know if I want to talk about my business right now. What I really need is, how do you fail so often and keep going? Like, because the startup scene and launching your own business is as a series of failures pretty much. And what was so great, she went on to have, like, she is a CEO, multi-million-dollar company at this point, and she looked at me and said, Dawn, I still fail. I fail every day. And here's the thing, is it's not going to get easier, but what I'm going to say to you is, you're going to have to figure out a way to be productive in spite of failing or feeling that failure, because it's never going to go away in your startup. It's never going to go away in your leadership. And it was such a great lesson, even in resiliency. What she was reflecting back to me is everything I just taught. So I know, I know that it's easy to teach sometimes, look at a screen, and it's so much harder to experience. But I guess I would just say that these definitely apply to the startup scene as well. I mean, here's another thing I'll throw out. 20 yes, 2 yeses or 20 no's. And that's just a raw average. I mean, it has nothing to do inside. I mean, maybe you're going to get 5 of 5, and I don't want to jinx it, but what I'm saying is, there's a lot of no's in startups. I mean, it, investors, etc., blah, blah. So know that it's normal. And
And
yeah,
that's where the resilience comes in,
that's where the resilience comes in.
right? Um, Dawn, we have a really interesting question about ageism and
Mhm.
discrimination. And as someone who has a wonderful life experience, it's pointed out that you look rather young for your age. Could you share with the audience maybe tools for addressing ageism in the interview process?
That's a great question. It hits like so close to my heart. So let me make sure I understand those. So ageism meaning, um, I look young, so my credibility is in question. Is that?
Or possibly the reverse. Maybe they're being seen as too old for a position. But answer based on your experience and try to help us out.
I wanted to make sure to clarify, because ageism is traditionally what you said, ladder, right? So it's this assumption that people that look older aren't fit for the job, or they have other prejudices that come in. I've experienced the opposite, where actually my youthfulness keeps me back from some leadership potential. And so I'd say the ageism is out there. I mean, it's definitely real. I had really great mentors when I was at Fuqua, and she was, I remember her just being really focused in on this issue. And unfortunately, I don't have super great advice, because unconscious bias is real. you can't change someone's unconscious bias in an interview, because you can't say to someone unless they've said something explicit to you, like, dang, you look old, I don't think we can hire you. Then you don't have, right? Like, it has to be explicit. Otherwise, unfortunately, really unfortunately, is that it lives inside of the brain of the other person. And so the best thing you can do is educate them on your work experience, educate them on how much of a badass you are. If it is explicit, I would say bring it up with the hiring manager. There's nothing stopping you from using your tools and empowerment to say, I really felt like this was an unfair process. And I would say use those tools and validate yourself.
Mm-hmm.
If you really believe that it's there. And also, that's not a place you want to work, right? You're not going to thrive in a place that's going to have that unconscious bias.
Right.
So it's a little bit of a reframe, but I hear you. Like, it's hard, because if you're getting a bunch of no's and you don't know why, it's tough to get there. But again, I'd just say focus on what you can do. Informational interviews are going to be key. Talk to people that are inside, that can know you on a different level rather than just the face-to-face, and see if you can make some momentum with the community of the people, instead of like maybe that one person that has an ageist attitude.
Well, on the topic of the tools that we have available to us, LinkedIn is one of those tools, and you mentioned it a couple of times during your presentation. Do you feel that LinkedIn is absolutely necessary for the job search?
Do I feel that LinkedIn is absolutely necessary for the job search? No.
All right.
But, well, no, and it can help. It can help. So the thing is like, how much support do you want to put out there for yourself, right? It's kind of that building the opportunity. You don't have to have it, because you can get to people in different ways, and it helps support your networking. It helps support your online image. They will go and look. Lots of people go and look. It's actually I think when I looked last, it has the most people on any social media platform is LinkedIn. And so if you're not going to participate in that, all that means is that you're not going to get the opportunities that are there.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have to have it? No.
Does it benefit you?
Yes.
Great. Thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you mentioned renewing your brand as part of the update, correct? Can you give us a couple examples of what that could look like for someone?
Yeah, renewing your brand. Yeah, on my slide. Yeah. So, so here, think about it like this, is that the job search, or what the market demands, changes rapidly. And so we've just seen this with COVID, and I kind of gave examples of what research is suggesting right now are really high in demand. So I would say the branding part of it is, what about those abilities and capabilities that the market is demanding today can you put into your brand to communicate that, oh, I got that in spades? So instead of just saying, again, like, hey, I worked at Duke and I did this, and here's a branding would have a different message. It would be a different story. It would be saying something like, I have been through, heck and back and learned how to do virtual reality in the last year, and here's how I did it. It would be just slightly changing to align more with the market and what that particular skill set is, and having words in there that are going to align with it, that's going to brand you in a slightly different way, even with the same experience. You're just highlighting different things that are going to be a little bit more enticing for the other to say, hey, I think I want to talk to this person.
Excellent. Well, Dawn, this has been really, really insightful for all of us. If you had some feedback on this, go ahead and throw it in the chat. I also launched that exit survey. Please take that. That really helps HERdacity as an organization succeed. Dawn, throw your contact information up on the screen so that they can connect with you after this webinar to follow your insights, follow you on LinkedIn and connect, maybe check out your website and all that jazz.
Wonderful. Yes.
All right. Y'all connect with Dawn when you get an opportunity. Connect with HERdacity. At HERdacity, we're on all the socials, and HERdacity.org on our website.